Okay, so welcome to the episode 2 of the Rationalist book club. In this episode, I want to talk about the first book of the genre that I read, and probably the foundational book of the entire genre, and this is Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality by Eliezer Yudkowsky. This is a fan fiction, obviously about Harry Potter, and it's an alternate universe where Harry is like a genius scientist boy who tries to figure out how magic works using the scientific method. That's how the series starts out, and it throughout the book the theme, the feel of the book becomes darker and darker, similarly to how the original books become darker and darker throughout the series. So yeah, that's one similarity. I read this book. I first started reading the book, I don't know, I think it was something like 7 years ago. And after a couple of chapters, I thought that Harry was very, very annoying. So I stopped briefly. And I picked it up again afterwards, and then I finished it. I didn't get into it until the second time I started to read it. So your mileage may vary. It depends on how much you like Harry Potter, I guess. Yeah, so it's been a while since I read it. But I think, I mean, I think it's a very, very good book, and it becomes better as you go along. So yeah, basically in this universe, there's some things that have changed from the original, and there are more explanations and like more in-depth analysis of certain mechanics within the universe of magic. So for example, how spells work exactly, or certain specific mechanics to certain specific spells. For example, the killing spell of Avada Kedavra is treated a bit differently. It's not enough. It has one of the properties that are added to this spell is the fact that it can go through walls, and so it's unblockable, or like even if you're behind cover, the cover doesn't mean anything, and stuff like that. Also, the Dementors are completely different, and I mean not completely, but they are not just like some spooky ghosts that you defend using the Patronus charm. You have to, like, there's more detail to it, and specifically the Patronus charm also works a little bit differently. So there are a couple of changes as compared to the canon, but it's overall it's pretty similar to how J.K. Rowling wrote Harry Potter. So there's this episode where Harry, in the very beginning of the book, Harry, since he's very smart and so on, and very rationalist, he figures out his origin story really, really quickly. It doesn't take him 7 books to figure out that he's special in some way because of how Voldemort disappeared during the attempt to kill him. He figures it out pretty quickly, probably in the first 7 chapters or so, because things just don't make sense, as like people talk to him in a different way, and he sees that it's something's up, and he just asks questions and asks more questions and more and more and more, and looks at the reactions of people who are responding to his questions, and just fills in the gaps, and figures out that he's the boy who lived, and that there's probably something really weird going on regarding the relationship of him and Voldemort, but he doesn't know what exactly, but he knows that there's something up, and he immediately realizes that a lot of the experts, or like these old wizards and sorcerers and witches, they all actually fear that Voldemort isn't actually dead, but that he'll come back again, and he figures this out pretty quickly, that he's not dead, and he will come back, and he'll probably have to fight him again. Then you have this episode in Gringotts, wizarding bank. He figures out a loophole. He finds out he asks the goblins some questions, and he figures that he could buy pure gold on Muggle market, bring it to Gringotts, have it made into money, take that money minus the fee for making the money, take that money, convert it back to Muggle money, and buy more gold, and just do it over and over again. And so that was really really funny. There is this distinction between rational and rationalist fiction. It's a very slight distinction. It's not really something that's completely separate. But the thing is, in rational fiction, you have characters that are rational, meaning you have characters that follow their own goals, and nothing happens simply because the plot demands it. It's just not when it would be convenient for the plot for something to happen. This doesn't happen unless some character has made it happen because it's in accordance with this character's goals. So that's just rational fiction. It's a reflection of how things would work out in reality. You don't have like weird plot twists that happen simply because. You just have people or characters following their own ambitions, goals, and performing actions in the real world to achieve these goals. So that's rational fiction. Rationalist fiction is similar. It's the same foundation. However, you have characters or just a character that actually employs these less wrong rationalist techniques or teachings. Characters that do probability analysis or that actually make experiments and use the scientific method to find out what's going on, or just things like that. But just uh, more emphasis on the actual techniques of rationality. So yeah, Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality would actually fall into this rationalist category because Harry actually uses rationalist teachings and techniques to figure out things. He conducts experiments. He does probability analysis. He just uses all this stuff like it's a skill, not just um, he's not just being consistent in his goals. He's actually going above and beyond. He's using all these teachings and techniques, stuff that you could learn on Less Wrong. The thing I like the most in this book and in this rendering of the Harry Potter series is how characters have more depth, much more depth than the original books, actually. I mean, the difference is so stark that you these are actually completely you would think that these are actually completely different universes because while the foundation is the same, even that actually the foundation isn't the same for all characters. For example, Harry is completely different to the version in the canon. He's not like a reckless teenager that has a bit of self pity and angst. It's more like he's an inquisitive. Uh, I mean, he is a bit rebellious, but not that much. He more than anything, he's really inquisitive and tries to figure things out. If anything, he's like Hermione in the original series. Hermione in this series is similar to Hermione in the original series, but there's more depth to every character. Fans of Ron Weasley will not be happy to find out that Ron Weasley isn't present in this book almost at all. I think he's just like some side character. He happens to be in a train or something. He doesn't play any role at all. But yeah, Draco Malfoy is completely treated completely differently. He's not like a cartoon villain, and there's like a lot of backstory into how and why there's this enmity between Dumbledore and the Malfoy family, and there's this entire history of how in the last Wizarding War how things have happened from both sides, and things that you would consider like there are a lot of moral and ethical decisions that people have had to make in the last Wizarding War, and there are a lot of, uh, you know, feelings of resentment and anger because people did the things that they did, and yeah, so it's a more believable scenario, even though the entire premise of magic is not believable. The characters themselves are more believable. They have more depth. They are much less cartoonish and much more human. Um, there's also a lot of analysis of how the wizarding society actually functions, what are the institutions, how the institutions work, um, the treatment of slavery of the elves, for example, and stuff like that. How the wizarding laws are passed, and so on. How the decisions are made. How the ministry works. Just much more in depth uh, treatment of the like. It's a the topics are of economy and society and politics and so on are treated at a level that you would expect like an adult to treat these things, not a kid. So it's really not a kid's book. It's an adult book, but it's based on Harry Potter. The thing that's really cool with this entire rationalist approach is that you have Harry do things that are described either implicitly or explicitly on Less Wrong, uh, or hinted at. For example, spending money. Spending money is like a topic in and of itself on Less Wrong. Uh, there's this sort of irrationality in the mainstream treatment of money. Uh, People don't spend enough money on things that work for them or things that are useful. They have this idea that saving is always better, and sometimes it might well be, and sometimes it's not. It just depends on the context. And sometimes the wisest thing that you could do is spend a lot of money on a certain particular thing. Uh, Specifically, there's this essay by Yudkowsky, also on Less Wrong, about how money is the unit of caring. Basically, if you claim that you care about X but spend next to zero money on it, but then claim that you don't care about Y but spend like tons of money on that, it, it just you just need to look at how you're acting and not what you're saying, and you will know the truth. And so money is actually the unit of caring, the because money is simply uh, a quantity that represents the amount of work that you put in to producing something. So money is really neutral, and your spending is what determines what you care about, actually. So, as money is the unit of caring, people simply don't spend enough of it on the things that they claim that they care about. So, what's interesting in this book is that you have a couple of situations where Harry spends tons and tons of money, and there's this entire in the beginning when he withdraws some money from the bank, uh, he actually smuggles a bit more than he was allowed to, uh, because he knew that he would need more uh, to achieve his goals. He saw that he has a lot of money as as his inheritance, and he figured he knew that he would need more. So he smuggles a bit in his pocket without McGonagall knowing about it. So there's also at a later point in the book there's also this situation where he literally empties his entire vault to save someone's life. He uses this um, loophole or mechanism in the wizarding legal system, and he saves a person's life. I will not say whose life he saves, by by having a ton of money at his disposal, and he just spends it all, literally the entire thing. Then you can also observe how conversations flow differently than in the original. Things aren't left unsaid. If something is not understood, he simply doesn't stop asking questions. He just asks more questions and asks more clarifying questions and more and more and more and more, and draws his conclusions. It's not like you ask a question, you get like a semi answer, and then that's it, and you just don't really know what the answer is. He just asks more questions, and eventually he uh, arrives at the truth. There's also like a lot of instances, a lot of conversations where he resolves some uh, issue with proposing a model, which is sort of a new thing. It's like a it's a sort of a rationalist thing to do. Like, let's say that in this model you have x, y, and z. The proportion of x to y to z is like 20 to 30 to 50 or something. It's like a very mechanical way of talking about things, where you build a simplified model of a thing, of whatever it is that you're talking about, and you try to figure out the almost like the mechanical relations between this thing and that thing, and how increasing this thing a bit more will decrease that thing, and you're just trying to figure out how the mechanism of the overall thing works. So it's a very very analytical rationalist way to talk about things, which isn't that mainstream, I don't think. There's like um, there isn't that much emphasis on like total and complete understanding of the mechanism of things, whether social or philosophical or political, whatever. It's more people usually work more like just say a bunch of stuff, and then somebody else says a bunch of stuff, and then you say a bunch of stuff, and then maybe there's some implicit understanding of what should be done, or maybe there's not. But in this way of conducting a conversation, you just have a lot of model building and model analyzing, if that makes sense. The interesting thing in the book is how the results of rationalist practices are treated. For example, it's not a, it's not like you are a rationalist and then things are simply resolved instantly because you just figure things out so fast that like there are no more problems anymore. It's more like there are a couple of things that he figures out really quickly and just just resolves them. Uh, but then you have these situations where he spends the entire book basically trying to figure out how the thing works, and he fails, and he just fails and fails and fails, but he fails in novel ways because he tries different approaches and so on. So it's not this wave of the wand, so to speak. It's more like a methodical approach to resolving problems, basically. Probably the best feature of the book is how the characters are deeper and so on, but there is like an immense difference between how the villain from the original and the villain from this book um, are described. It's pretty incredible. So Voldemort in the original books is kind of like a protagonist, like kind of like the typical villain. He's like he's just like an evil wizard, and there's not much more to it. He was born that way. He has like an origin story with Salazar Slytherin or whatever. And since he was a kid, he was sort of very talented, but also very manipulative, and that's it. And then he just becomes uh, just like this caricature of an evil wizard who isn't that really intelligent. He just every book he gets defeated by a different reason, for a different reason, but as as the books go on, he doesn't really change his approach. He doesn't really try harder. That's also a lesson very present on in these very present on Less Wrong. Like, try harder is a thing. You should try to do things. You should actually invest much more effort, including money. But yeah, basically in the original, it's not that he's not that impressive actually. He's just this stereotypical villain. In this book, it's scary how scary he is. It's a completely different type of villain. First of all, he's not evil for evil's sake. It's not He's not a caricature of an evil wizard. He's a very, very extremely capable, uh, extremely high intelligence character with a lot of indifference to how moral, with a lot of indifference to human suffering and morals and so on and so on. He doesn't try to inflict as much suffering as he can. It's not like that. It's just he is indifferent. He is a psychopath. And he is also extremely intelligent and extremely capable. And the most important thing, he's almost a rationalist in and of himself. Like there's this part where I don't know if I'm spoiling it. There's this part where the villain changes his opinion mid book, right? It's like in the middle of it all, he does something because he has uh, a particular goal. He doesn't actually want to kill Harry. That's interesting. He doesn't want to kill him in the very beginning because if he wanted to kill him, he just would. There's a part where this is actually explicitly mentioned that like if he wanted to kill him, he just wouldn't use a wand, but he would use a gun. So that's the level of unconventional high intelligence displayed by Voldemort in this book. In the middle of the book, he completely changes his approach because he finds new information that becomes really, really important to him. Voldemort is much more impressive in this book. There's, I will not say exactly uh, what it is in order not to spoil it, but I'll just leave with a question. So, if you were making Horcruxes, uh, how many would you make if you wanted to maximize your chances of survival? Would you make two? Would you make seven? Or would you make much more? So that's an interesting question to contemplate. And if you are simply following the numbers, you will probably understand the answer, and you can probably expect that this answer to be present in the book as well. Anyways, these are a couple of thoughts that I had about Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality. It's a really, really good book. I think this is actually my favorite book because it's so complete. It's just there's a lot of things going on and a lot of very interesting topics, and it's everything is so well integrated. The only shortcoming I can think of is the fact that Harry himself is like annoyingly arrogant sometimes. But I mean, you can't have it all. It's a really good book. I give it a 10 out of 10, and I would recommend it to everybody, or maybe not. I don't know, not maybe not to everybody, but to people who love Harry Potter and are sort of interested in science and rationality and philosophy and so on. So yeah, this is it for this episode. I will probably post another review uh, soon. I don't know which one it will be, but it's probably going to be something written by John McCrae or Wildbow. Yeah, that's it for this episode. Thank you.